Okay, now we are about ready to get into Dynamesh, and from there we will start to block in some of our landmarks and establish some proportional measurements on our model. Okay, so really Dynamesh, we can just hit go. We have subdivision levels, so I'm actually going to go back and undo that and just really, it doesn't matter. We just delete lower, so it's all unified, and then we can just go into Dynamesh. And that's that. I'll turn off my polyframe, and we can just start to get a little bit crazy with this now. And for roughing in landmarks, you may have seen me do this on other videos, but I'll just really go crazy with the clay tubes brush. And actually, our resolution is pretty high for the Dynamesh as it is, so we'll just leave it at that. Could be a little higher actually, because we only have a very limited amount of topology, so I'm going to put this up to 1K and remesh it, just so that we have enough polygons for our landmarks to stay there. So really what I'm going to start to look at is kind of the iliac crest going back through here. And let me just put up the spotlight. So I'm going to start with kind of, let's see, where do we have a good view? This is a pretty nice view. So I'm going to start with iliac crest, and I'm also going to block in kind of what is the pubic symphysis down here. And then to establish our proportions, we have a measurement from the pubic symphysis to the pit of the neck, right? So that will help us to kind of ground this length in reality. Okay, so really, this is just me kind of hammering in a little bit of form onto the model. This is nothing that's going to be permanent, but it's going to give us kind of landmarks. Just kind of etch a center line up. So I really am just kind of starting to just put a little bit of form in. Landmark there for the anterior superior iliac spine. Landmark here for the anterior superior iliac spine. And pit of the neck is going to be up here. Right, so we'll put this in. It's kind of turning his head a little bit this way, so I'm just going to block in a little bit of sternocleidomastoid. All these things are, just so flexible at this point that there's nothing really to worry about. You just want to be proceeding logically. And by logically, I'm talking about starting to put concrete reference points on your model. The reference points can move around and change distance and proportions, but what they're going to be is they're going to be like ground truths that you're going to start to build everything else off of. All right, so as soon as we get these two, so pit of the neck, we know that we have clavicles coming off, we know we have sternum coming down, we know that we have, from those two, we have kind of all the different areas of the pectoralis major going off. Right, so actually while I'm on clavicle, I'm just going to really crudely block this in. Right, and we kind of want to take into account both the shape and, if we're able, the elevation. Right, so both arms are raised, which means the clavicles aren't running horizontally anymore. They're actually lifted up. And the arms are slightly different in their elevation, but because the right arm is kind of rotated forward, this arm, the extra elevation isn't the same as if it was out to the side, right? So these are going to be roughly okay. And in this particular pose, as we've looked at when we kind of analyze this, we have a lot of deltoid kind of flowing up here to the arms. Okay, so that's kind of blocking this in. I'm just going to quickly break in the thoracic arch there in the rib cage. And you can see that we might have to adjust some proportions. But to kind of get us a little bit of armpit, just for my own sanity, I just like to see a little bit of shape come in. You can see my clay tubes is a little rough because I haven't adjusted my stroke to my rule distance to whatever. Alright, so essentially I'm putting the scaffolding in. I don't have any scaffolding around the back yet. I'm just going to freestyle some of these in for now. These are going to be essentially the back of the rib cage. Right, the lower limit of the rib cage, which is just a continuation really of what we see down here. And then also posterior superior iliac spines down here. And the continuation of the iliac crest. All right, so we are just making something that's looks like a tube man with a bunch of lines on him, but hey, you know what? You have to start somewhere. And it's good to just get in and get messy. Otherwise, you get very precious about where you're starting from. And it can really, it can discourage you and make you afraid to do anything on the model. Okay, I won't do too much because I need to explain it as I go. But now that we have kind of some reference points, this point down here, the pubic symphysis, is kind of just off of the page in the reference. I'll just show you about where it is. It's pretty much where this is cut off. It's really pretty much right down here. Okay, so it's going to be the measurement from there all the way up to here that we're going to be interested in next. Okay, and I have that on good authority because I measured it myself, that that distance from the pubic symphysis to the pit of the neck is 59 centimeters. Right, so I measure that with traditional sculptor's calipers, but what we want to do is to measure that with our digital calipers and to make sure, essentially to calibrate this distance on our model. And then we can adjust everything from that ground truth. Okay, so literally something as simple as that. That's our, sorry, let me just do that again. I'm just going to raise this up a little bit so that it's going to the right place. So rotate around, see that it's correct. Okay, so that distance is what I said, 59 centimeters. And this transpose line, so notice that I went to the move. It could be scale, rotate, any of those, just as long as we get the transpose line. That gives us actually a unit measure, right? And this is totally uncalibrated. It says it's 2 units, which is fine. It's 2 arbitrary units in ZBrush. But we're going to calibrate that for this model, and we're going to go down to transpose units in the preferences menu, and calibration distance, instead of 2 units, we're going to put this to be 59 units. Okay, so that should be cool. And now all of these future measurements that we use to kind of enforce the proportions of our model will be relative to what we've just established here. So this is our baseline measurement. So the next thing we want to do is measure anterior superior iliac spine to anterior superior iliac spine, so across the width of the pelvis. And I will just look up the measurement for this, and this one is meant to be 24 units wide, right? And right now it's 19 units wide. So it kind of confirms what you can tell by looking at this, that it's a little bit too narrow across the waist relative to its height. And so literally we're just going to stretch him a little bit with our transpose line. And stretch him a little bit the other way. And he's at 23.5 5 units. And that's getting closer. It's getting closer. And so we just do a little bit more, and then we'll call it good. Okay, so again, this is a little bit dependent on where you have your anterior, how accurately you have this landmark placed, but proportionally that's a little bit better. The next measurement that we just look at really quickly is what we have here, which is the height of the essentially the rib cage, the sternum, from the pit of the neck down to the epigastric depression right at the break. And if you look at your notes for this measurement, it should be about 16, and it's a little bit too long. Okay, so I'm not really going to transpose it. I'm just going to move it up with the move tool, right, just to get this up to be the right height. And then I'll just switch back and move this up. And this should probably be about, I'll just look at this cell, about 16. Ish right in here. So that's my target. So I'm just going to go back to move mode and just push this up a little bit. And then I'll just be very explicit about where it goes. All right, so I have these ground truths marked. So I kind of like those places, and I don't want to violate them too much. Okay, so we can sculpt around them, and we can, sculpt other places, but we want to kind of preserve the integrity of those. Okay, last thing that we're just going to look at is kind of the width of the torso, side to side. And this guy is going to be 30 centimeters, kind of at its widest, or sorry, it's both essentially its narrowest point across the width of the iliac crest is 30 centimeters, but he's also 30 centimeters across up here, right below the kind of the bottom serratus, which is, if I bring this up, find the view that I'm looking for. So width across here from the bottom of the serratus is whatever I said, 30 centimeters. Okay? So we just check that, both across the iliac crest and again, this is something that's measured side to side, so you're going to need to get a view from the bottom to really make sure that you get it right. And this says about 35, so we're a little bit wide on the extremities, and because we're about the same up here, we know we just need to tuck it a little bit in on each side, right? So anterior superior iliac spine is pretty sound, we know that, but how we have it arcing around is a little bit too extreme. Okay, so we can do this a couple ways. I'm going to do it cheap and cheerfully. Something like this. I'm going to get mask rectangle. I'm just going to draw a line up from there. Click on the mesh a couple times to blur it. And then I actually get the transpose and just kind of dirty, but move that in a bit. And I'll move this in a bit. And we'll have to adjust, obviously, but just looking at the measurement now. So remember, when you're moving these around, if you don't have much experience with it, if you grab the yellow or the orange on the outside, it allows you to move it. All the red or white works on the inside. Actually makes it do something. So we're getting a little bit closer. Just kind of whack this in one more time. And this is a lot of setup, but in the end it'll be worth it just because we'll be able to proceed with some confidence that our model is in the right proportions. Okay, so you can see it's made a mess of things. I've just done that because I'm really kind of clumsy and I don't know ZBrush very well. Couldn't think of a better way to do it, so I'm just going to go in with the clay brush and smooth it out. In fact, I'll use the thing that I showed you before. I'm going to set the modifier to 0. And this will just really just kind of smooth out the crazy parting line that I just created. All right, so that should be quick, and we'll be done in a minute. Careful of the anterior superior iliac spine. We don't want to violate that. And as you proceed with your little torso sketch, you can reference the other measurements that are on the model sheets in the reference section. And some of those might help you. I mean, there's measurements in the back, there's measurement between the anterior and posterior superior iliac spines, a few different things. And actually, once you have a few, you can actually just measure from the reference images and do a little calculation to figure out measurements that you don't have. But that would require a little bit of math, and we're all artists here, so we don't necessarily want to do math. But we can if we have to. Okay, so that's our proportion model up to between these critical points, widths across there, width across here, here to here, here to here, and here to here. So we should be pretty happy with that, and from here we can proceed to block in more landmarks and more muscles and start to look at contours going around. Contours from all the different directions, and maybe improve the gesture a little bit because we're missing a little bit of the twist and a little bit of the lean from the image. So we have chest coming directly toward us, we have pelvis going a little bit more this way, right? So we have a few improvements to make, but we're started anyways.